Right, well the first fly we're going to tie this evening is a standard nymph. I've put the hook in the vise and it's a TMCO 102Y, which are excellent hooks. They're light, they're strong, and they're almost round bend, and down eye I prefer. And I've got you'll see a bead head on that. It's a 2mm tungsten bead head. I would not normally use a bead head for a lot of my nymph fishing, but I'm putting it on so that you can see how I tie them on, and you can use them or not use them, leave them on or off, according to if you're fishing in deep water, you might like a bead head. I'm using what I normally use for tying, a longer silk, the uni thread, the common one. This is a 6/0, and it's just grey. The colour's not so important, provided it doesn't clash or isn't too bright. So I start at the front, and I just start to whip the line over itself, which secures it, so that it won't come off. Then I cut away the excess. Then I go back with the bead head and make a little mound. You'll see the way the bead head will become more centralised and in the middle. So that's now in a nice position. So then I will whip the whole of the body of the hook to the bend, or just around the bend. And that gives the whipping on the hook gives a nice smooth and easy body to work on for the fly tying I'll be doing on top of that. Now, as this is a wet fly, I want it to sink. It needs to sink, of course. So I use a hen hackle for the tail. This is just a natural grey hen hackle. I've cleaned up the bottom a bit and already tied one fly from it. So just, depending on whether you're right or left-handed, just take a bunch of fibres on one side, probably about 1 centimetre of quill, and then just hold them and pull them off and try and get it so that the fibres are more or less the same length. Then I hold them in my right hand, because I'm right-handed, and I hold them over the hook, which to about the length I want them protruding at the back of the fly. Then I change fingers and thumb and hold them with the other hand in the same way. I then bring the line up on the near side of the hook against my thumb and take it down on the far side of the hook against my finger, sort of get it in position, and then hold it all tight and nip it tight. I do that a couple of times, and that will ensure that the fibres of the feather are on top of the hook as they are. You can see they're perfectly placed there. And I'll just go around that 2 or 3 times, and then it's important to go around behind the tail like that, and then come forward a couple of turns, and that stops it from dropping down. Okay, the tail is now tied. I will now dub a body on. I'll do a ribbing. I would not normally do a ribbing, and again I'll do it to show you how I do it. But this is just standard sewing thread, and I wax it I pull it through hard cobbler's wax, I think it is. It's just a mixture of rosin and beeswax, and that makes it, it waxes it, makes it sticky. It was really good when using silk because it stopped it rotting, but it still makes it nice to work with that sort of wax rubbed, melted into it. So I just tie that there and then clean it all up and make sure you whip it down neatly. Firmly, I mean, so that it, and neatly, so that it won't come out when you're using it. It's very frustrating when that happens. Okay, now I'm going to dub a body using the dubbing tool. Now my dubbing tool is something I made many years ago. There it is there. It's just a handle, which is the end of an old artistic paintbrush handle, a part of a safety pin that I've straightened out and put a loop in one end, a hook, and I just bore a hole in there, push that in, and then epoxy resin it in there. I do that with all my needles. Most of these I made 50 years ago and I'm still using them. You'll find it very difficult to drill that hole straight, but not impossible. Okay, now to dub a body, you use a sticky wax. You can make your own or you can buy it. I used to make my own, and this is easier to use because it's it's like a lipstick. It's nice and convenient. This is called Loon. I think that probably any brand would be good. And just pop it on the thread like this. You want too much, but you want that thread to be quite sticky. And then what I do is I just dab my finger on it a couple of times, which makes my finger just a tiny bit sticky, not very. And now we're going to dub the body body hair off a possum. And here I have a packet of possum. It's an old Kodak slide box. That shows how old I am. You'll see the hair in there, and it varies in colour. So just select FAQ colour, a nice fur. It's soft and lovely to work, it's easy to work with, and then you just spin it on the thread. Spread it out and just spin it by rubbing your forefinger. Like, my camera is so close to the work you can't see much of what I'm doing, unfortunately. But so you just spin it on like that, okay? Now this is the good bit with the dubbing hook. You then take the dubbing hook, you remember, and put it over the thread beyond where the fur is being stuck onto spun onto the thread, and then just bring the loop back, and a couple of turns, one turn at the end, and then go to the front of the fly. You then spin the dubbing. I can't really show this, but you spin it. Can you see what I'm doing? I think you can. You spin it. Don't spin it too tightly. Now I'll come away, or it'll break where it leaves the hook. Just start to spin it, and then go around the hook once, and then you can spin it as tightly as you like. It's right now. There's no point, but the fur will become tidy and neat in the loop and in the spun loop, and then you just wind it around the hook. I'm having great difficulty because the camera is about 5 inches from the hook, and it's sort of not much room. The objective is to taper this body so that the natural shape of the nymph, which tapers slightly, getting slightly thicker towards the front. Okay. Now, I haven't got enough to put it. I don't think I've got enough to finish the fly later. So tie that off and cut away that excess. And now I will rib the fly. I could have used copper wire for this, which in some ways would be better. This is less obvious as a ribbing, but I'm only doing to show you how I do it. Now, what's important with the ribbing, you will have noticed that I've been tying over the top and away from me. I'm now going to rib the fly from underneath and over the top towards me. In other words, in the opposite direction to where the fly is tied, which ties down the windings and cuts across them and is much more secure. So you do that, it had 3 or 4 turns, and then just tie that off. Like that. 3 turns is plenty, and then cut away the excess. Okay, what I haven't described to you are these shears that I use. These are shears made in Japan. I was given them as a present from a fishing friend. They're absolutely excellent. I prefer them to scissors. It's entirely a personal choice. You can buy similar things where your wife buys, or if you are the wife, sewing materials at Spotlight, I think it's called, for a few dollars. They're not as stainless steel and as prettily as made as those, but they're very effective nevertheless. Okay, now there's only one thing left to do, and that's to put a thorax on this fly. So again, I'll dub it with the same hair, or perhaps slightly darker. Again, I'll wax the thread in the usual way. Just touching my finger on the top once or twice, but not too much, and then get some of this slightly darker wool. And I don't need very much because it's only a small fly and only a little bit required of dubbing. And I'll just spin that on in the same way as we did the body, like that. And then I'll get my dubbing hook again, and as before, make a loop and tie it off like that and spin it. I'm just spinning it between my two hands, you see, like that, spinning. And not too tight at first, but once you get it round, you can then tighten it up a bit and just build a nice little mound, a thorax, behind that beadhead. See? Just so that it's obvious. Now, the one thing about mayfly nymphs and mayfly adults is they have very pronounced thoraxes, and it's my absolute conviction that the thorax is a trigger. It's very difficult as camera hit. A trigger for the fish to take the fly. So cut away the end of the loop, and all we require now is to do a whip finish. Now I do whip finishes with my fingers. Most people use whip finish tools, and I do this because that's how I learned. I don't think they had whip finish tools when I started in the 50s. So there we are. Now to finish off, just put a dubbing needle through the loop and just pull it tight and then slip it out. Just pull that up tight a little tiny bit, take off the excess like that, and the final operation is to put some of this cement on where I've been tying and doing the whip finish. This is a wonderful contactor by Revel. It's just a hobby shop. For decades I used clear nail polish. It doesn't matter what you use. This is ethyl acetate based, the same thinner as in nail polish, and it's excellent because it's so convenient. That's a hollow tube coming down there, so you just locate a finger near it so that you can hold it steady with your thumb against the vise or something, and then another finger, and I've got too much there, so I'll wipe a bit off, start again, and just put it on where you tied my whip finish. And that way, okay, now I've lost the lid, there it is. That fly is now finished. Now a little trick that I always use is when I take the fly out of the vise, I always take it out using a really fine dubbing needle, which I made this when I was 15, I think, and I hold it. That has two benefits. A, it's easy to handle the fly, and B, it makes sure that the eye of the fly is clear. Now, I didn't get any stuff in that eye, any of the cement, or there's no fly tying materials over the fly, but when we tie the other flies, you'll see that it's quite easy to cover the eye of the hook with fly tying thread or materials, which makes it impossible to thread when you're onto the line when you're in a hurry and the trout are rising. Okay, so that's the nymph, which now seems to have swum away. I've dropped it. But thank you. We'll move on to the next flight.